The air was full of joy in Camelot. King Arthur's court was decorated in the most vibrant colors. The tables were laden with the finest delicacies and the wine was flowing generously. Knights, ladies, musicians, and courtiers had gathered in the great hall to celebrate the Christmas feast, and the festive spirit reigned in every corner. During the celebration, King Arthur, true to his custom, refused to begin eating until he had heard an amazing story or witnessed a challenge or wonder. It was at that precise moment, when the banquet was at its height, that a deafening sound, like thunder, burst into the hall. The doors of the great hall opened wide and, to everyone's astonishment, a knight of imposing stature, mounted on an equally impressive horse, made his entrance. But he was no ordinary knight. Both he and his mount were of such an intense green that they seemed to have stepped out of another world. The court fell into absolute silence. The Green Knight introduced himself and explained that he had not come to fight, but to propose a game. The game was simple but risky. A knight present would have the opportunity to hit the Green Knight with his axe. But there was one condition: within a year and a day, that same knight was to seek out the Green Knight in his abode, the Green Chapel, and allow the Green Knight to strike him back. The proposal left the court in a state of shock and doubt. Was this a trap? Or simply a friendly challenge? After a prolonged silence, Sir Gawain, one of the youngest and bravest knights of the court, stood up. With a deep respect for tradition and honor, he accepted the challenge on behalf of King Arthur. With axe in hand, Sir Gawain unloaded a blow that decapitated the Green Knight. But to the astonishment and horror of all, the Green Knight, far from falling dead, bent down, picked up his head, and holding it by the hair, reminded Sir Gawain of his promise. Then he mounted his horse and, with his head still in hand, rode out of the court as mysteriously as he had arrived. The shock of the event left the court in a state of disbelief and reflection. Sir Gawain, with the weight of his promise, knew that, in a year and a day, his honor and bravery would be tested again. After traveling for days through vast landscapes, facing the inclement winter weather and the loneliness of the road, Sir Gawain arrived at a majestic castle in the middle of a forest. The castle, though imposing, seemed to be a refuge from the cold that bit at Gawain and his mount. Crossing the drawbridge, he was greeted by the lord of the castle, a sturdy man with a kindly look, and his wife, a woman of unparalleled beauty. Not knowing Gawain's identity, they offered the knight shelter and hot food, showing unreserved hospitality. During dinner, the lord proposed an intriguing game to make Gawain's stay more enjoyable. Each morning, the lord would go hunting in the forest and Gawain would stay in the castle. At the end of the day, they would exchange what they had obtained. Gawain, seeing the opportunity to rest and recuperate, readily agreed. On the first morning, while the lord was hunting, the lord's wife visited Gawain's room. With flattery and flirtatious gestures, she attempted to seduce him, but Gawain, remembering his gentlemanly code, resisted her advances, allowing only a kiss on the cheek. At the end of the day, the lord returned with a large deer, and Gawain, true to his word, kissed him, the same one he had received from the lady. On the second morning, the lord's wife again tried to tempt Gawain, this time with more impetus. Although Gawain's resistance faltered at times, he again allowed only a kiss. That night the lord brought with him a boar, and Gawain reciprocated with another kiss. On the third and final morning, the lady, using all her cunning and charm, presented Gawain with a magic belt which, she claimed, would protect its wearer from harm. Gawain, thinking of the impending encounter with the Green Knight, accepted the gift, albeit reluctantly. That evening, when the lord returned with a fox, Gawain presented him with 3 kisses but omitted to mention the belt. The evenings at the castle were filled with festivities, music, and dancing. Gawain, though grateful for the warmth and hospitality, could not help but feel a weight in his heart for the secret he kept. At the end of his stay, he prepared to continue his journey to the destination that awaited him at the Green Chapel. Gawain, mounted on his loyal steed, finally arrived at the enigmatic Green Chapel. The place, more a moss-covered mountain than a real chapel, exuded an unearthly atmosphere. Steeling himself, Gawain approached, remembering his promise and the challenge he had pledged. Inside the Green Chapel, he found the Green Knight, who greeted him not as an enemy, but as a brave man who had kept his word. The knight was sharpening his massive axe, and the sound of stone against gleaming metal created a deafening echo in the cavernous chapel. Gawain prepared to take the blow, but the Green Knight parried twice, testing Gawain's bravery. On the third attempt, the axe only grazed Gawain's skin, leaving a small wound on his neck. It was then that the Green Knight revealed his true identity. It was none other than Bertilac of Haudbazert, the lord of the castle where Gawain had been staying. He explained to Gawain that it had all been a test orchestrated by the sorceress Morgana, who wanted to test the knights of the Round Table and make Arthur and his queen afraid. It was Gawain's failure to reveal the existence of the green belt that caused the small wound on his neck. However, Bertilac praised Gawain for his courage and honesty, acknowledging that, although the young knight had fallen into a small temptation, he had shown great integrity and bravery overall. Gawain, overwhelmed by the revelation and feeling ashamed that he had not been completely honest, accepted the criticism with humility. Bertilac offered to return to the castle and celebrate the new year together, but Gawain, wishing to reflect on his actions and what he had learned, decided to return to Camelot and share his experience with King Arthur and his fellow knights. After the revelation of the Green Knight, Gawain, with the green belt still tied tightly around his waist, began the journey back to Camelot. The journey gave him time to reflect on his actions and the nature of honor. Although he had resisted the temptation of the Lord's wife and had shown courage in presenting himself to the Green Knight, his decision to hide the belt weighed on his conscience. As he crossed the gates of Camelot, Sir Gawain's face showed the marks not only of a physical but also of a spiritual journey. The court, anxious with anticipation, greeted him with a standing ovation. Although he had returned physically unharmed, he carried with him the weight of his experience and the lessons he had learned. King Arthur, with his wise and penetrating gaze, was the first to perceive that the adventure had left a deep impression on Gawain. One evening, as the two shared wine by the fire, Arthur asked him to narrate his encounter with the Green Knight. Gawain recounted his experience, his trials in the castle, and his confrontation in the Green Chapel. He spoke honestly about the temptation of the Lord's wife, and how he had accepted the magic belt for fear of death. Arthur listened attentively, and when Gawain finished, the king said, "All men have their foibles, Gawain. A knight's true worth lies not in not having them, but in recognizing them and learning from them." The Knights of the Round Table, upon learning Gawain's story, decided to adopt a tradition. As a sign of solidarity with Gawain and as a reminder of the humility that all should carry, they decided to wear a green sash on their armor during the year-end festivities. Over time, Sir Gawain's story was remembered not as one of failure, but as a testament to human imperfection and how even the noblest have lessons to learn. At Camelot, the story became a legend, a narrative that future knights would learn, not as a warning, but as a hint to personal growth and introspection.